Welcome to the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum for the 14th Congressional District. This event is being recorded. The Naperville League is proud to present tonight's candidate forum in partnership with the Aurora Area League of Women Voters and the DeKalb County League of Women Voters. I am Susan Craighead, President of the League of Women Voters of Naperville. The League is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support or oppose candidates for public office. You can rely on the League to present fair and civil candidate forums where each candidate is allowed an equal chance to respond. Election Day 2022 is only a few short weeks away. Now is the time to make your plan for how you will cast your vote safely and securely on or before Tuesday, November 8th. We hope that part of your plan is to educate yourself on the candidates and issues in order to confidently vote the whole ballot. In addition to watching candidate forums live or recorded, you may also find candidate information on vote411.org, our nonpartisan online voter guide. All candidates have been invited to respond to questions, and their answers appear complete and unedited. A video of this candidate forum will be linked to Vote 411. And now let me introduce our moderator for tonight, Carol Tidwell from the Aurora Area League of Women Voters. Carol?
Thanks, Susan. And welcome everyone to the candidate forum for the Illinois 14th Congressional District 2022 election. As Susan said, it is being sponsored tonight by these chapters of the League of Women Voters, Aurora Area, DeKalb County, and Naperville. And thanks to the audience who is seeing this live on Zoom and Facebook or watching a recording. My name is Carol Tidwell, and I have been trained by the League to conduct candidate forums. I do not live or vote in the 14th Congressional District. We're following League rules for the forum tonight. After opening statements by the candidates, I will ask a number of questions that were prepared by the sponsors and which were not provided to the candidates ahead of time. Since this is a forum and not a debate, I ask that the candidates direct their statements and responses to the audience and not to each other. As per forum rules, the candidates will not use their cell phones or other electronic devices during the forum when answering questions. Please understand that the League of Women Voters is not responsible for verifying the accuracy of the statements that candidates make during this forum. The candidates will each have 3 minutes to present an opening statement in turn and up to 2 minutes to respond to each question, again in turn. At the end of the forum, they will each have 3 minutes to make a closing statement. The timekeeper will keep us on track in the interests of time and fairness to each candidate. I ask the candidates to watch the screen as you are speaking. Time reminders will appear at 1 minute, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and finally a stop sign. The candidate speaking should wind down at the 15-second warning and stop speaking when the stop sign appears. Although I will allow a couple of extra words so you can complete your sentence, but please, no compound sentences. We want to get in as many questions as we can and give the same amount of time to both candidates. The candidates will be asked to speak in alphabetical order, and we will rotate who has the chance to be first to answer a question. We're going to get started now, so I ask both candidates to be on the screen, please. And I ask that you keep yourself muted, however, until it is your turn to speak. We'll begin with opening statements, and candidate Grider, you are up. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm Scott Grider, and I'm asking for your vote to be the next congressman for the 14th Congressional District. I'm the current Kendall County Board Chairman and President of Commercial Services for a title agency. And I live in Oswego, where I'm a husband and I have the best job as a volleyball dad to my 7th grade daughter. I'm running for Congress because we need change. And with my experience, I believe that we can give the people of the 14th District a voice that brings change to Washington, D.C. As a county board member, I've worked hard to bring transparency, accountability, and tax relief to our residents. Within months of being elected, I introduced and the board adopted a 10-point transparency plan. And upon becoming the chairman of the board in 2016, we sought new requests for qualifications for our vendors, resulting in savings of hundreds of thousands of dollars to the taxpayers. We also have not taken the CPI or raised property taxes on existing homeowners since 2016, providing real relief to county taxpayers. In a time when Washington, D.C. is full of hyper-partisans and defund the police extremists, I have a history of working in a bipartisan manner, being unanimously elected by my peers of both Republicans and Democrats 3 times as chairman. Additionally, I try to lead in a manner that puts taxpayers and the people of Kendall County first, which leaves us with very few party line votes. The choices in this election are really clear. We've been working hard and will continue to do so by promoting free market, good government principles that promote individual and economic freedom, not more government spending. I've been invited to steak fries and golf outings, union halls in Joliet, to ethanol plant in Hennepin, to small businesses and food processing manufacturers. The message for change is loud and clear. Stop out of control federal spending. Make America energy dependent. Secure our border and make our neighborhoods safe. This message rings clear, the need for change. By electing Scott Greider to Congress, you can count on my commitment to America. I will work with my colleagues to fight inflation and lower the cost of living for all Americans. Work to guarantee a future that is free and gives parents a voice. Just as I did at the local level, I will fight for a federal government that's accountable to the people and work to ensure our country is safe by securing our southern border and investing in our military. We must hold the administration accountable for the disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan. I've had experience as a library district trustee, a zoning commissioner, a plan commissioner, a park board foundation member, a YMCA board member, and I've helped to volunteer for numerous charities or events in our community. My well-rounded experience of being in the trenches with friends and neighbors at the local level leaves me well equipped to represent you in the People's House, the United States House of Representatives. I'm Scott Greider, and I'm asking for your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Underwood, your opening, please.
Well, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Lauren Underwood, and I have proudly served the people of Illinois' 14th District since 2019. I'm a registered nurse from Naperville, and I spent my career working to expand healthcare coverage in communities across our country. I worked to implement the Affordable Care Act at the federal level, and then I joined the Obama administration working on public health emergencies and disasters. I decided to run for Congress after attending a league town hall that our then congressman hosted, where he promised that he would protect healthcare coverage for people like me with pre-existing conditions. We won that 2018 election, and I became the youngest Black woman ever elected to Congress. On day one, I promised that I would be accessible, transparent, and responsive as I serve our community. I'm very proud to say that I've done just that, delivering real results for the people of the 14th. Since being elected, I've introduced 10 pieces of legislation that have been signed into law, 6 under President Trump and 4 under President Biden. My legislative agenda is centered on making our economy work while providing economic security and opportunity for working families in Northern Illinois. To lower costs and fight inflation, I wrote the Healthcare Affordability Act with my constituents top of mind. The legislation signed into law short-term as part of the American Rescue Plan limits costs for people who buy their own coverage to 8.5% of their income. I also supported the Inflation Reduction Act, a new law to finally allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices, saving seniors thousands of dollars each year. All of us should feel safe in our communities. To address the gun violence epidemic, we need to take urgent action with data-driven, evidence-based policies that prevent gun deaths, like universal background checks and banning sales of military-style assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. I support the unrestricted right to the full range of reproductive healthcare services, which includes access to safe, legal, and affordable abortion care. And in Congress, I have voted to protect our reproductive freedom. The stakes could not be higher. Extreme Republicans promised to vote for a federal abortion ban, blocking the protections that Illinois has already put in place. They want to control women and punish women, no matter what state they live in. We cannot let them win. We need serious and effective leadership to meet the unprecedented challenges facing our community and our country. I am grateful to have the opportunity to serve each of you. I'm asking for your vote so we can continue to do this important work together. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll get started with questions now. And the first one will go to you, candidate Underwood. And at any time, if either of you would like me to repeat a question, I am happy to do that. What are the most critical threats to our national security, and how would you address them?
Well, we certainly are facing many threats to our country during this time. We've had a global pandemic. Obviously, we are facing global inflation, but when I think about our national security, we know that the global competition between powers like Russia and China, the rise of authoritarianism, certainly do threaten our national security. I've been really proud to serve in the Congress on Homeland Security committees. In my first term, I served on the House Homeland Security Committee, where I was the Cybersecurity Subcommittee Chair. And in this Congress, I serve on the House Appropriations Committee, where I continue to serve on the Homeland Security Subcommittee, where we are responsible for funding the Federal Department of Homeland Security and other key federal agencies designed to keep our country safe. We know that many adversaries do try to interfere on ongoing business and technologic interactions with the cybersecurity space, but we also know that we face additional threats as these authoritarian regimes continue to try to expand their influence, particularly in the Pacific region. I think it's really important that we have a diplomacy-first approach, continue to have robust funding for the State Department, and to continue to invest in those programs and obviously our military to keep our country safe and strong.
Thank you. That question to you now, candidate Greider.
Thank you for that question. I'm very much a believer in peace through strength, and that's something that I feel like this administration has not been on top of. We've seen several things that have happened on the national front or international front. One was the initial disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. I don't think anybody would argue that it was time to wind it down, but when things were going south, he didn't do anything other than continue to pull us out of there and put lives in jeopardy. I think because the international community senses weakness in this administration, the invasion of Ukraine also occurred, and you can better believe that the Chinese are watching what's happening in Ukraine and around the world as they continue to get closer to Taiwan. Another national security issue that we're facing is very much at our border, our southern border. That's a national security issue. Over 3 million apprehensions have occurred at the border. There's been 800,000 known getaways, and over 150 countries have crossed that border. We need to secure that southern border because that is a massive national security issue that we're facing. And this administration has failed on every single front, and Congress has done nothing to help with that as well. But whether it's Ukraine, it's Afghanistan, it's China, it's North Korea, who launched another ballistic missile, or securing our southern border, there's been failure after failure. And in Congress, I'll work to combat that.
Thank you. The second question goes to you first, candidate Greider. And it is this: what policies can Congress enact to address inflation pressures and create a vibrant economy?
Thank you for that question. I'm so glad that you asked. There are a number of things that we could do. The first is that there's been $9.1 trillion spent from the federal government since February of 2021. And that seems like a big number that's hard to even comprehend. But if you break it down, there's 435 members of Congress. There's roughly 750,000 people in each congressional district. And that math comes out to $27,500 per person per district. think about that number. That's $27,500 per person. This is what is crushing our economy right now. That's what's driving up inflation, is this unbridled government spending. And what we need to do is to get back to what makes this country thrive, and that's supporting our entrepreneurs, and that's cutting back on regulations and streamlining those processes so that entrepreneurs can actually get out there and do what they do to innovate and to come up with new ideas in the world. One of the things that I've heard over and over in this district is people are really hurting. This is a real crisis. It's not fabricated. It's not even partisan at this point. It's something that is real, that we need to handle. And it's between, people are making decisions between gas and groceries and school supplies. And so much of it is because of the federal government. So we can turn that around immediately by reining in this federal spending. And energy independence is another issue that is driving up costs as well. And we need to get back to being energy independent here in America. And it's really all of the above approach. Let's look for every possible way, whether it's biofuels to solar to nuclear power as well, and that'll help drive down energy costs.
Thank you. Candidate Underwood, to you, please.
I know so many families across our community are struggling with the high cost of goods and services. And we have been laser focused in the Congress on fighting inflation and lowering costs for families. We've come a long way. Through pandemic relief programs like the Paycheck Protection Program, I was proud to bring back $2 billion to keep small businesses open during the pandemic and keeping people open. In fact, my opponent's own company, the Near North Title Company, accepted $1.5 million in PPP funds and had their own loans forgiven. Now, with the American Rescue Plan, which is the most recent COVID relief package, I brought home $883 million for counties, townships, and cities across the 14th Congressional District. In fact, Kendall County got $25 million out of that pot. And, my opponent and I worked together to help the families in Kendall County through the pandemic. Now, I know, again, that people are struggling with the high costs that they're facing. It's straining families' budgets. But just like we took action in 2020 to meet the moment within the pandemic, and we took action in 2021 to get people back to work, I am proud to have supported legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act to help lower out-of-pocket costs for American families for services like healthcare services, letting Medicare negotiate prescription drug prices, capping insulin costs at $35 a month, limiting Medicare beneficiaries who have medications to $2,000 per year out of pocket under Part D. And then obviously for people who buy their own healthcare coverage, my legislation, the Healthcare Affordability Act, was also extended within the Inflation Reduction Act, which was all paid for by requiring the corporate tax evaders to finally pay their fair share. We are making strong progress as we continue to fight inflation on behalf of hardworking families across Northern Illinois.
Thank you. Candidate Underwood, this next question is to you first. What policies will you pursue to promote social and racial justice in our country?
Well, we know that we have a long ways to go. There's so much division. The division is not just partisan division. Obviously, we've seen attacks on people because of their identity. We're seeing a rise in hate towards Asian Americans and trans Americans. We've seen, obviously, racism. I believe that we have systemic racism in this country, and that is why I support legislation like restoring our voting rights. It is essential that the American people all have the ability to cast their vote in free and fair elections and make sure that those votes are counted. In this upcoming 2022 election, there are voters across many states who are voting in congressional districts that are subject to litigation because of racial gerrymanders. We also know that there are significant health disparities based on racism in this country. And so, there's nothing wrong, for example, with Black moms, and yet Black moms in this country are 3 to 4 times more likely to die of pregnancy-related complications. And it's because of an experience that I had with a close friend of mine who died after childbirth that I wrote the Black Maternal Health Momnibus Act to address this long-standing health disparity in this country. We know that we have an opportunity to come together to heal some long-standing racial wounds in this country. We have an opportunity to take action to extend opportunity for all Americans, but that requires serious leadership. That requires people who are willing to call out problems, who are willing to acknowledge problems, and who are willing to lead and advance policies with the lens towards equity. That is exactly the work that I have done throughout my 4 years in Congress on your behalf, and I'm looking forward to continuing it.
Thank you. That question to you now, Candidate Greider.
Could you repeat that question, please?
Certainly. What policies will you pursue to promote social and racial justice in our country?
Thank you. I think one of the really important things that we need to do is to provide economic equality for everyone. One of the great things about America is that we have the ability to be entrepreneurs and to get an idea and start a business and go out and really do something to make our lot in life better. And to in order to do that, many times we just need an idea to get ourselves going. And the problem that we run into is that there is often government barriers to this. And so what we need to do is streamline regulations and lower these barriers so that people that have an idea that can help pull themselves up don't have to run into these same barriers that everybody has. We need to cut that red tape so that people can innovate and do, again, what makes America terrific. And that's come up with new ideas and new ways of doing business. And having economic equality is really how we can raise up everybody. And we really need to, one other thing we need to be mindful of is processing fees that oftentimes governments put into place these processing fees, which makes it prohibitive for somebody that has that idea to get out and try to start a business on their own. And those are the kinds of things that I hear over and over again when we're talking to small business owners is, hey, how can you help us to streamline government? How can you help us to make it easier for us to get our business going and to get research and development for it, or to expand? And why are we considered? Why are some businesses considered essential services and others are not? We just saw that throughout the pandemic, where small businesses had to struggle because the government decided whether they were essential or not. And so once we break down those barriers, we can really go a long way towards equality.
Thank you. And this next question is to you first, Candidate Greider. And it is this: do you believe that reproductive rights should be under the jurisdiction of the state or federal government?
Thank you for that question. And the Supreme Court has made that decision to prioritize states' rights when it comes to abortion. And Illinois is one of the most progressive states in the union for that. What we aren't addressing here is the extreme nature of my opponent's position. She thinks the federal government should mandate third trimester abortions with taxpayer funding to perform them for any reason. She has voted at 9 months to allow it. She's voted at birth. That is way outside the mainstream. And so the Supreme Court has decided, and they've sent it back to the states. And as I said, Illinois is one of the most pro-choice states in the union. But what we need to look at is the extreme positions that my opponent has taken.
Thank you. That question now to you, Candidate Underwood.
I believe that women have the unrestricted right to the full range of reproductive healthcare services. This is a value that the vast majority of people across Illinois 14 hold, and it is in line with the values that we all share. These decisions should be made by women. I consider the Dobbs decision, which sent the ability for reproductive freedom back to the states, to be a tragedy. And I am working in Congress to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, which is legislation that would enshrine Roe into federal law. My opponent, however, he's on the record supporting a federal ban on abortion, which would take away our right to reproductive freedom here in Illinois. That's unacceptable. People like Scott Grider, people like Lindsey Graham believe that they know better than women. Think about it. Scott believes that abortion should be left to the states. Well, what about contraception, which is what Justice Thomas alluded to in that Dobbs opinion that he released? You know, I am not comfortable personally with this idea that someone like my opponent would be able to make personal healthcare decisions for me. And, you know, I also am not comfortable with the idea of someone like my opponent making decisions to criminalize women for seeking healthcare. Our reproductive freedom is on the ballot. We have a serious choice to make in this election, and I would encourage voters across Northern Illinois to really think about it as they cast their decision before November 8th.
Thank you. This next question is to you, candidate Underwood. What steps would you take to collaborate with legislators of another party to pass legislation important to your constituents?
Well, I've really had a strong track record of bipartisan leadership in the Congress. I'm so proud of the 10 pieces of legislation that I've had signed into law since I was elected. I've had 6 pieces of legislation signed into law under President Trump. We're talking about a diverse range of topics on issues like lowering insulin costs, talking about border security bills, legislation to support our veterans. We've also had a very strong track record of bipartisan relationships with local leaders. We've secured millions of dollars in federal funds for important local projects, things like funding the CASA Clubhouse in Kendall County, funding a kindergarten readiness program in DeKalb County, helping the city of Joliet replace their lead water pipes. We're in the middle of doing work right now with the city of Sandwich and their police department to help them get body cameras. We're working to secure over $1 million for Northern Illinois University to be able to have a microchip and workforce development hub, right? We're doing this work in collaboration with local leaders who are Republicans, Democrats, and nonpartisan individuals. This is the type of legislative record, bipartisan leadership that our community expects. When I was sworn into Congress, I told the people of the 14th District that I would work with anyone to get things done for them. And we've been really successful in doing just that. And, you know, I also believe in accessibility and transparency. And so when folks want to debate these important issues, we have town halls. I've had over 40 town halls since I was elected to the Congress. And it's been a really powerful way to debate and discuss the top issues of the day and make sure that everyone's opinions are being heard and their viewpoints are being raised. And I look forward to continuing to have that opportunity for great dialogue across our district.
Thank you. Candidate Grider, that question to you now, please.
Thank you. And I appreciate that opportunity. And I find it interesting that my opponent talks about her bipartisan efforts and yet votes with the Biden-Pelosi agenda nearly 100% of the time. And one thing that she brought up has to do with the CASA Clubhouse. And to my knowledge, the funding hasn't even been delivered yet. And that's creating a number of issues for them as well. Something that I have done is actually have worked in a bipartisan basis. I've been unanimously elected 3 different times as chairman of the Kendall County Board on a bipartisan basis. And I work across party lines to get things done for the people of Kendall County. That's what's most important, is to be able to work with, you know, legislators of both parties, with fellow members of both parties, with other elected officials, because we have to put Kendall County, and in this case, we have to put the 14th Congressional District first. And when we're out there, you know, we need right now, the biggest thing that we need to do is we need to fight inflation. We need to work together to reduce the cost of living for the people across this district. We need to make sure they feel safe and secure in their homes. And My opponent has taken money from Ilana Omar, who called for disbanding the Minneapolis Police Department. And she thinks that is a way for us to be safe and secure in our homes is collaborating with people of that nature. That's not a bipartisan issue at all. So that's something that I've actually had a lot of success with, and I'll be doing it when I'm in Washington, as I have throughout my career here in the county and even beyond that. So thank you.
Thank you. And the next question is to you, candidate Greider. What are your views on federal student loan forgiveness?
I think that this is a tax on the 87% of people that don't have federal student loans. For those of us that had student loans and went to school and had to pay those off, we knew what we were getting into when we did that. And it's our responsibility to pay our debts and to pay that off, and to forgive that just doesn't make sense. Even if you could get behind supporting that, there has to be real reform in how we fund our schools. And there wasn't that real reform. It was just a unilateral reduction in loan repayment. And to me, that's wrong. And we need to look at beyond just the student loans. It's not if we get ourselves into this situation, it's not up to the federal government to bail us out on that. It's up to me as an individual making that decision to take care of it. And so I think they made a big mistake, and it further adds to the $9.1 trillion in federal spending. It's just one more thing that is going to add to the inflationary costs that our public is facing, and that are hurting our residents here in the 14th district.
Thank you. Candidate Underwood, that's question to you now.
All students, regardless of their economic background, should be able to pursue the education needed to ensure a successful future. Now, I know that college is not for every student, but if that's the pathway for their successful future, they should be able to have an opportunity to get that education. Now, through the most recent federal funding law, we just increased Pell Grants by $400. And we also changed the way that federal financial aid is awarded. But I believe that it's time to bring down the skyrocketing costs of an education. And through my time in Congress and my support of legislation like the higher ed reauthorization, we have an opportunity to do that. I support President Biden's student loan forgiveness policies. Now, I'm a millennial, and people in my generation grew up being urged to go to college. It was framed as the singular pathway to be in the middle class. And so people took out loans and went to school like they were, quote, supposed to. And the problem is many of the loans were predatory. And after graduating, our generation just hasn't hit the milestones of our parents' generation. Folks aren't starting businesses, they're not starting families or purchasing homes at the same rate. This student loan forgiveness policy has an opportunity to help right those wrongs and set a whole generation on a more solid financial footing, offering important economic security as we move forward.
Thank you. The next question is first to you, candidate Underwood, and it is this. What measures do you support to improve and secure elections and voting access in our country?
So as I described earlier, it's so important that we pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. Those two bills are key to making sure that we have, no racial gerrymandering in this country. We can end partisan gerrymandering. We can make Election Day a federal holiday. We can standardize early voting periods and make sure states are not advancing voter suppression laws, like criminalizing people who want to hand out water or snacks to folks who are waiting in line for hours oftentimes to vote. It's really essential that all Americans know that they will have the ability to vote in elections. Now, I also recognize that one party is very much in the business of peddling lies and really just election denying. My opponent is very much a part of that GOP party. These extremists are calling into question the legitimacy of the 2020 election. My opponent himself has called Joe Biden's election debatable. That's not a serious person who should be representing us, the people of the 14th District, families across Northern Illinois in the Congress, particularly when we know that we need to advance legislation to further strengthen our democracy in the face of domestic threats like the rise in domestic terrorism, obviously the events of January 6th and the ongoing assaults that we see on our democracy across our states. We know that urgent action is needed, and I am very well prepared to continue to vote to advance these pro-democracy bills.
Thank you. Candidate Greider, that question to you now, please.
Thank you for that question. And let me be really clear. We know that Joe Biden is the president because it's led to one of the worst presidencies in the history of our country. Look at what's happening with inflation through the roof. It's up 550% during his tenure right now. We have crime at all-time highs. The murder rate is up 20%. We have an assault on our police. So election integrity, yeah, it's very important, and it's something that that needs to be addressed. But again, my opponent is suggesting that an all-powerful federal government needs to take control of our local voting laws, and of course, I'm opposed to that. That's I believe very much in the one person, one vote. In one person, one vote, and we need to have these strong reforms that'll bolster confidence, and the ways to do that are to purge our voter rolls of those that have been deceased or that have moved, and that's something that hasn't happened. We need to be able to train our election judges better trained to make sure that they are looking out for obvious signs of fraudulent activity, and we need to have some kind of an ID. And if you can't have a driver's license, there is a way for us to get some kind of ID to make sure that you are who you say you are. Something that very much is under attack is the fact that people believe that the elections aren't fair, and so that's what we need to restore, is just to ensure that we do have free and fair elections, and sending it to the federal government, I can't imagine would restore any kind of confidence in that. What we need to do is have reforms at the local level, and that's something that I'm very much in favor of. And my opponent actually believes in proxy voting. She's sent her vote for the people of the Illinois 14th District to a congressman in New York. So I don't think that's the kind of effort that we want to have, is to be able to, is that next? Are we going to have proxy voting?
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. The next question is first to you, candidate Greider, and it is this. Are you supportive of the current U.S. House Select Committee's investigation of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol? Why or why not?
I want to thank you for that question. And that kind of goes back to the previous question is anyone that broke into the U.S. Capitol needs to be held accountable in a court of law. But what it highlights is that election integrity is something that's very much a concern for many people in this country. And the way for us to go about doing that, we just outlined, a minute ago, is we need to ensure that there are free and fair elections here in the United States. We need to make sure that we do purge our voter rolls of deceased and voters that have moved, out of state or out of a jurisdiction. We need to make sure that there's a way to show that you are who you say you are, that you're not giving your vote to somebody else. You're not giving a proxy to somebody else because you show up and say who you are. Let's have some ID that shows that you're the person that's voting for that. And that's how we need to ensure safe and fair elections in the United States. And we also need to allow for observer access. There shouldn't be any secrets in when you're casting your ballot. You should see exactly where it goes. And so I think that's kind of a three-step process. One is we need to ensure that the voter rolls are purged. We need to make sure that our judges are properly trained. We need to make sure that there's an ID, and I guess it's 4 steps, and make sure that there's observer access as well.
Thank you. That question to you now, candidate Underwood.
The January 6th attack on the United States Capitol was despicable. It was an un-American act of terrorism that nearly caused our democracy to collapse. We saw the insurrection lead to the deaths of several police officers. It threatened the lives of the Vice President of the United States and other members of Congress. It disrupted a peaceful transition of power, which has been a central principle of American democracy. I am a very strong supporter of the January 6th committee. I think that they have done outstanding work in highlighting several facts that I think are very important for the American people to understand. The American people, thanks to the January 6th committee's outstanding work, now know that President Trump was repeatedly told that he lost the 2020 election, yet he chose to directly engage in efforts to overturn election results. And he pressured the vice president to go along with his plan. Thanks to the January 6th committee, people know that President Trump asked people to travel to DC on January 6th and did calls to action to provoke the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. President Trump planned to join the march to the Capitol and knew that people were armed. And we now know that Republican members of Congress were involved in planning the attack. I believe that participants at the January 6th insurrection should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And I recognize the severity of these threats, which is why I am just so disgusted at the GOP's normalization of political violence, which has creeped into our community here in the 14th district. And, you know, the way that the GOP views political violence as a way of obtaining power and influence. It is very dangerous to the health of our democracy, and the January 6th committee is doing outstanding work.
Thank you. Next question goes to you first, Candidate Underwood, and it is this. What, if any, measures do you support to address climate change?
Well, we know that climate change is an existential threat that's facing our country and the planet. Obviously, there are important healthcare, economic considerations, national security considerations, and obviously environmental impacts. I think we need to be really serious right now about promoting clean energy solutions while creating good paying American jobs and doing so with equity. And that's why I voted for the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is helping Illinois increase its resilience to climate change and extreme weather. It's strengthening US energy security and delivering environmental justice. We also know that this is an important time for us to make a commitment as a nation to transition to a 100% clean energy economy. Now, we've seen complete obstruction from congressional Republicans as we have been working to make this transition, but I have voted in favor of a transition by 2050. I also was very proud to vote for the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a new law that has the largest investment to fight the climate crisis in US history. Now, my opponent, he's called climate change overblown. Can you believe it? I mean, it's pretty shocking. What I have supported are reasonable solutions to the climate crisis, like the Inflation Reduction Act, which will create clean energy jobs right here in Northern Illinois and help us respond to the crisis that we are seeing in this moment.
Thank you. Candidate Greider, to you, please.
Thank you. And once again, my opponent shows that she is completely out of touch with what the people are thinking in the 14th Congressional District. I support an all of the above approach when it comes to climate change, and we need to let the free market do its job when it comes to climate change and create energy independence here in America through a market-driven approach. And in the middle of a recession is not the time to raise bills on people that are already struggling. And that's exactly what my opponent did by voting for the bills that she just mentioned. And right here in the 14th district, we have so many opportunities. We have nuclear, we have solar, we have wind, we have one of the largest biofuel companies in the country, if not the world, right here in the 14th district. And you don't have to look very far. You can look to California, who on one day in the last couple of months, they announced that they're going to stop the sale of gas cars by 2030. And then the next day they're talking about how they're having brownouts. We need to have a grid that supports any of this, and the market will help to dictate that. The market will help to dictate that. We also have to have an approach that doesn't leave us less competitive to the rest of the world. One of the great things about America is that we lead the world in carbon reduction and in other matters related to this. And yet, if one of the farmers that I spoke to recently referred to the fact that he could buy a tractor here in the United States, and because of the high emission standards that are on that tractor, it costs him more to import it right here to Illinois than it does to competition in Brazil or in Europe. So it's important for us to look at all these options, but we can't do so by making the world or our country less competitive to the rest of the world. And that's the kind of policies that my opponent supports. That shouldn't be the case. And so, I've actually had success as well.
Thank you.
Using solar in Kendall
Thank
County.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Candidate Greider, the next question is yours first, and it is this. What are your priorities for immigration reform? Candidate Greider.
Sorry, hit the mute button.
It's all right.
So, one of the most important things we need to do, we talked about it a little bit ago, is we need to secure our border. There's over, was 3 million stops, at the border, and you can tell all of these governors have been asking for help, and none has come from Washington. And we need to get to a point where we have where we are securing our border, where we finish the wall, where we have a pathway for immigrants as well. I mean, that's what our nation was built on. But we have a real problem right now with them coming in and not knowing where to go. Over 800,000 of them have been lost. And, that's creating to a number of different crises. One is we've already have a crime rate that is the highest in 20 years. We've got, police officers that crime against them has gone up more than it has in the last 20 years. And then fentanyl. Fentanyl is the leading cause of death for 18 to 45-year-olds. And that's because we have a porous border right now. We need to crack down on that. Rather than hiring more IRS agents like my opponent voted for, we should have hired more Border Patrol agents to help protect our residents. This is a real national security issue that we're facing here. And there's a lot more that can be done.
Thank you. That question to you, Candidate Underwood.
Well, in the Congress, I've been focused on keeping our community safe in a way that aligns with our moral values. I support comprehensive immigration reforms that makes our immigration system safer for everyone. Now, that includes managing the border, protecting border communities, and cracking down on criminal organizations. But it also means creating pathways to citizenship for undocumented immigrants and keeping families together and supporting asylum seekers. I'm a co-sponsor of the U.S. Citizenship Act, which would do all that and more to make our immigration system sustainable and humane. Now, my opponent talked a lot about border security. I serve on the Homeland Appropriations Subcommittee on the House Appropriations Committee, which is in charge of funding the agencies along the U.S.-Mexico border. Agencies like U.S. Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection, and then other agencies that you're probably familiar with, like TSA at the airport or FEMA. In the most recent federal funding bill that was signed into law this spring, we increased border security funding by 10%. So you just heard my opponent say we needed more law enforcement officers along the border, and we've done it. I've actually been to the border. I have met with these agents, but guess what? Cruelty is not a solution to our immigration challenges. And, Scott is from a party who supports child separation. He represents a party who uses human beings as political pawns. And I'm just not going to tolerate rhetoric from someone who believes that child separations at the border make our country safer. This is an important issue that we have to get right. I've talked to our farmers, our small business owners. They all want comprehensive immigration reform. They all want affordable health care. They want solutions. They don't want political stunts.
Thank you. Next question is first to you, Candidate Underwood. What efforts do you support to ensure that healthcare is affordable for all constituents?
This has been a top priority of mine since I was sworn into Congress. A signature piece of legislation that I authored is called the Healthcare Affordability Act. It says that no American would pay more than 8.5% of their income for silver level marketplace plans. So these are for people, who purchase their own healthcare coverage. We had this legislation signed into law in 2021 as part of the American Rescue Plan. And then something incredible happened. 14.5 million Americans signed up for coverage, many of whom got coverage for the very first time. And 4 out of 5 of those enrollees found a plan for $10 or less per month. Now, this was done through a popular tax credit program, and they were set to expire at the end of this calendar year, at the end of 2022. And you know that I was not about to let that happen. So I worked with my colleagues and secured a 3-year extension of these popular tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act that was just signed into law in August. So now the American people and folks all across Northern Illinois can know with confidence that they will be able to have a source of affordable healthcare through the end of 2025. There's one woman in our congressional district who was paying over $2,000 a month for her healthcare, and now it's $244 a month. That's a significant savings on a family's budget. We also know, as I mentioned earlier, that the Inflation Reduction Act, this important legislation this summer that was signed into law, includes important prescription drug savings for seniors who are on fixed incomes. So now seniors can get insulin for $35 or less a month. Their annual Part D benefit will not be more than $2,000 a year. And finally, Medicare can negotiate prescription drug costs. This is all paid for by requiring corporations and those corporate tax evaders to pay their fair share. It's important, and we got it done.
Thank you. Candidate Greider, to you, please.
Thank you. America is home to the best medical care in the world, thanks to innovative treatments and cures. And the Democrats like to, undermine our position. And you just heard my opponent say, on one hand, that, touting all these great things that she has done. On the other hand, health insurance inflation has increased premiums by 17% and continue to go up because of her policies and because of Nancy Pelosi's and because of Joe Biden's. We're facing an inflation crisis here in the United States, and it's made by her policies in Washington, D.C. And then she goes and touts that these are our victories. The American people are smarter than that, and they understand that that's not the case. That if she had this under control, then these prices wouldn't be going up at the rate that they are. And so what we need to do is we need to continue to modernize and personalize healthcare to provide affordable options that fit individual needs. There's not a one size fits all, top-down bureaucratic method from Washington, D.C. We need to let people decide what's best for them. And we need to empower our patients and invest in therapies and life-saving cures and lower prices across the board through choice and competition and transparency. That's how we make healthcare better here in the United States. And frankly, we need to expand our access to telemedicine as well. That's a increasingly valuable way for us to lower costs and provide services. And we need to do better about providing mental health service as well. And with the fentanyl crisis that we're having because we have a porous border, drug treatment needs to fit into that as well. And all that's as well. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do, a lot of things that we can improve upon, and if elected, we will.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for questions tonight. So we'll go to closing statements, please. And you are first with that, Candidate Greider.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time here this evening. And once again, I'm Scott Greider, and I'm asking for your vote tomorrow, if you vote early, or November 8th. As you've heard tonight, the contrasts are stark. Our first priority must be to stop the hemorrhaging that the people of the 14th District are feeling. Many of the issues they're facing today, from paying higher gas prices to higher grocery bills to higher school supplies, are directly related to government action. It's time to send someone to Congress who will work to rein in the reckless spending for preferred constituencies. There has been $9.1 trillion in government spending since February of 2021. There are 435 members of Congress and approximately 750,000 people per congressional district. This means that there's about 27,500 in new spending per resident of the 14th Congressional District. Think about that. $27,500 per resident. This simply cannot continue, or we'll never get our economy under control and back on track as the leading economy in the world. We need someone that supports an all-above energy policy to make America energy independent. We have many of these options right here in the 14th Congressional District, from wind and solar to biofuel and nuclear. We need someone who will work to make sure that every student, regardless of zip code, can succeed by increasing transparency so parents actually know what their students are being taught and where their tax dollars are being sent. We need someone who will work to provide better and improved healthcare for all Americans. We have the best and most innovative treatments and cures in the world. We should modernize and personalize healthcare to provide affordable options that fit individual needs, empower patients, and lower prices across the board through choice, competition, and transparency. We need someone who will invest in the U.S. military, believes in the old adage of peace through strength, and work to secure our southern border. As a result of the Democrats and my opponents defund the police efforts, crime has gone up, overdoses are spiking, and law enforcement is facing some of the toughest working conditions on record. We need someone who will fight for neighborhoods, which means supporting our men and women in law enforcement. A vote for Scott Grider is a vote for this commitment to America. We will focus on growing the economy, creating safe and secure neighborhoods, fighting for the future of our children, and a government that's accountable. These are issues that are colorblind. These are issues that are not limited to women or men, parent or child, teacher or student, white collar professionals or union laborers. These are American issues, and your vote on November 8th for Scott Grider will bring change to Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Underwood, your closing, please.
Well, it's been an honor to serve as your representative in the Congress for the last 4 years. And during that time, I told you that I would be accessible, transparent, and responsive. And we've done that by holding over 40 town hall meetings since I was elected. We've also been extremely effective. I've had 10 pieces of legislation signed into law under both Presidents Trump and President Biden. We bring back resources, over $2 billion to this community to support small businesses impacted by the pandemic. We know that these are serious times and they require serious leaders. My opponent has been a local Republican leader for the last 10 years as his party has descended into Trumpism. My opponent, he believes in tax giveaways to the rich. And as you heard tonight, doesn't have a plan to extend economic opportunity for all hardworking families here in Illinois' 14th District. My opponent doesn't have a plan for healthcare, and he's against Obamacare and protecting pre-existing conditions. My opponent supports a federal ban on abortion, and at a time when our reproductive freedom is on the line, my opponent believes that he knows best and is on record supporting policies that would criminalize seeking abortion care. My opponent's an election denier, calling it debatable whether Joe Biden won the 2020 presidential election. My opponent, he calls climate change overblown, when we know that we are facing a serious climate crisis in this country. And in many ways, most devastatingly, my opponent refuses to support an assault weapons ban. He would rather stand with his allies at the NRA and the gun extremist groups than stand up and support kids and families who are scared in our community, people who are scared of going to school, going to church, people who are scared to go to the grocery store and the library, people who are scared to go to parades for fear of a mass shooting, and yet he won't budge. We have an important choice to make in this election, and we have a little over 30 days to go out and vote. I would be honored to earn your support. I want to encourage you all to sign up to permanently vote by mail. It's a secure and easy way to participate in this election. You can also go and vote early in person between now and November 8th. If you want to learn more about our campaign and how to get involved, please visit underwoodforcongress.com. We would love to have you join us. Remember, the last day to vote is November 8th. I'm Lauren Underwood, and I'd love to earn your support. Thank you.
Before we end tonight's forum, we must thank the candidates for your participation tonight. Without your willingness to appear and answer questions that inform the voters, forums like this could not take place. We also thank the chapters of the League of Women Voters who sponsored this forum tonight. And give a reminder that early voting has already begun. Please be sure to vote on or before November 8th. Thank you.